Will those who can stand please do so for the ceremonial honor guard.
Present arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets ran glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Coast, port, arms. Guard, ready, step. Hut, 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 hut,
Please be seated. First of all, thank you for coming. Alessandra, thank you for the beautiful violin prelude. Members of the U.S. Coast Guard, Ceremonial Honor Guard, and from the U.S. Army Band, Pershing's own Master Sergeant Matthew Smith. I'd like to invite Pastor Bruce Lunn of the Bluemont United Methodist Church to please come up.
Good afternoon. I invite all to be silent for a few moments, to settle your hearts and your minds and your bodies, and gently breathe in and out. May the essence of the divine you hold in your heart be with you now. You begin this memorial gathering as a group of strangers, yet you harbor within your hearts a deeply shared memory. Most of you gathered here are connected by a tragedy that took the lives of loved ones. Some gathered here experienced this tragedy as first responders, and your lives altered since that precious day 50 years ago today. Yet memories are so dear and near. For others here, there is a deep, deep reverence for the loss of precious life and those who tended to their remains. We are one community. We are gathered here with new friends and companions to share our grief and our sorrow. And we are gathered here to remember. And in remembering, allow ourselves to grieve. And in our remembering, we are called to heal together of body, mind, and soul. We remember the smiles and laughter of those who tragically departed this life. We remember the touch and the feel of those who passed so long ago. Yet time is a mystery, and many feelings and thoughts may seem like it was only yesterday. Now this community of new friends are able to reach out and give thanks, to hug a fellow traveler who grieves and remembers as you do. And we are gathered here so that those who rescued and searched, who tended to those who had passed, can remember their pain and their loss. Lord, we are gathered here to grieve, to remember, and to heal. These precious men and women and children who perished are not forgotten. They are remembered and loved through many generations. In this precious community of which we are all a part, there are expressions of life, and after so many years, finally a place and a time to grieve and to share. This gathering is like a precious coin that was lost and is now found. The presence of the holy is here, embracing each one of us in our sorrow and in our grateful hearts. Amen.
Please take a moment to turn off your cell phones. I have mine off. So yeah, please do that. Just for your safety, we do have exits on the side. Probably you entered that way. There's also an exit in the rear. So just so you know that. Many families were not able to be with us today. And so I wanted to let you know that this remembrance ceremony, both inside and outdoors, is being filmed. Appropriately, the name of the cinematographer, his company is called Hero and Heart. I only found that out later after contacting him. I thought that's very appropriate for here. So just so you know, this will become available online. So not only will all the families who couldn't be here today, but you yourself will have a permanent record of what happened here today. So I think that in the back, can you hear me now? Can you hear me better? Are we good? I think we've got it turned up just about full blast. But I can get closer to the microphone. I needed room to move around. But anyway, I can adjust. So, dear families, first responders, and guests, my name is Peter Weeks. I'm president of the Bluemont Citizens Association. And speaking on behalf of the residents of Bluemont, I welcome you here. Sincerely, our hearts go out to your hearts. I will start by reading a letter that we received from Senator Mark Warner. Dear friends, I'm writing to extend my warmest greetings to all who are gathered for the 50th anniversary Remembrance ceremony for Trans World Airlines Flight 514. This event provides each attendee with an opportunity to pause and reflect upon the 92 individuals who perished aboard that flight when it crashed in Bluemont on December 1st, 1974, exactly 50 years ago. Our thoughts are with their families and friends who still grieve. Let us also take a moment to salute the remarkable commitment and service of the first responders that quickly arrived at the scene from Clark County, Loudoun County, Frederick County, and the city of Winchester. I commend the Bluemont Citizens Association for your efforts to organize today's event and for establishing the bronze plaque and granite memorial that will ensure that the individuals who were lost that terrible day will be remembered and honored long into the future. I send my best wishes for a meaningful event. Sincerely, Mark R. Warner, United States Senator. Wow, it seems like just yesterday, and yet it was many months ago. A group of us here in the village were aware that the 50th anniversary of the crash of Flight 514 was approaching. We also realized, with some surprise, that there had never been an occasion in which relatives were provided the opportunity to properly recognize and honor those who perished. This recognition, this memorial, has been long overdue. We made a commitment then to do everything possible to bring you, these families, together. Frankly speaking, after 50 years, our expectations were very low about being able to contact first responders and family members. Here we are today, a full room, standing room only. Wow. As we'll hear, their sacrifice later saved the lives of countless others. Appropriately, this setting, then known as the Bluemont School, was the command center during recovery operations. Today, we'll unveil this bronze plaque to always remind us of that day and sacrifice. Present today, in your hearts, your loved ones still live. In your memories, they remain close to you. Take a moment now, family members, say out loud, all together, the names of the loved ones you lost that day. Starting now. Thank you. Now, will first responders who were there that day please stand? Thank you for your service. Now, will the Bluemont Women's Auxiliary, women who prepared sandwiches, soups, and hot drinks for the first responders that day, please stand. Are you here? Is there anyone here? Thank you for the comfort that you brought them. We are honored to have in attendance distinguished members of the military, the federal government, the airline industry, and airline safety organizations. And we thank you for supporting this event. Our first speaker today is Phyllis Randall, Chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. Chair Randall will be then followed by Dr. Hassan Shahidi, President and CEO of the Flight Safety Foundation, followed by our keynote speaker, Chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, Linda Hamilton.
I can go by Linda. It's fine. It's Linda today.
I wonder who
It's a
weighed
great
that.
name.
Oh my God. Chair Randall, will you rescue me?
Well, good afternoon. Can you all hear me in the back okay? Okay. I do want to acknowledge that I have two fellow elected officials with me today. My former member of the Board of Supervisors and now state delegate, and my friend Gary Higgins is here with us today. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Delegate Higgins. And my colleague from the Blue Ridge District, the Little River District, Laura Tacroni, has joined us today. So when I moved to Loudoun County, my husband and I did a lot of research on the county. And so I knew about this airline, the crash of Flight 514. And of course, when I became chair of the county, you take time and you read about all the events in the county and you know about it. You're aware of it. But being aware of something and feeling that thing are two very different things. So when I heard about it, my response, like most people's response, was something like, well, that's terrible. I'm so sorry that happened. And then you move on because you're not always connected to it. When I found out this was going to, the 50th anniversary, the commemoration was going to happen, I stopped and went back and read everything I could find about the crash, the incident, the people, and what happened after. And I moved from being aware of it to connected to it. Thus connected to your loved ones and connected to all of you. And it was a very different moment to do that. There was a saying that says, a person is not gone until the last time their name is spoken. This today, this plaque outside with the names on it means that your loved ones' names will always be spoken. So in very many ways, they're always here. This acknowledgement of what's happening and the people who were on that plane, 4-year-old children and history-making military. It's not the same thing to say, gosh, that's terrible. It is something different now. I am so grateful for the Bluemont Association, for everyone to bring this moment together. And I was so surprised that this had not happened before. It's interesting because if you've ever lost somebody, a loss when someone says, oh, that was 50 years ago, somewhere in your head you're like, was it? Because weren't they just there yesterday? Didn't they just walk through my door last week? Don't I still want to call them and talk to them when something good happens or something bad happens in my life? Don't I want to remind my grandchild of what they were doing? And didn't I name somebody after them already? You know, all these things. So 50 years ago can seem like a really long time, but it's also yesterday when it's your loved one and somebody that you lost. And so we're here today, and I don't even know what to call this, because you don't want to call it honoring, because that's not the right word. I guess the right word is commemorating, and to say that your loved one's names will now be spoken. There is a plaque that is there, and not just by you and people in your home, but by everyone who knows about this and comes and reads that plaque. When their names are spoken, they continue to live. Two other things happened as a result of this crash that I think need to be said. One, and I'll read the resolution that came from the board in just a second. One of the first things that happened and was really important is that the investigation and what happened led to changes in how accidents and altitude is reported. And so that's how things are said when they're called over changed to try to, well, you can never ensure something won't happen again, but to try to hope that something like this doesn't happen again. The other thing that happened, and this is really important to me because before I was chair of the county and still by profession I'm a mental health therapist, is there became an acknowledgement that people who were survivors are part of this scene, live with this and are traumatized by it every day, especially first responders who were there and who saw it. Sometimes we forget that the people who respond, even if you didn't know the people who perished, are going to be impacted. And when I read that one of the first responders was Keith Brower, who later on became the fire chief of Loudoun County, it was so amazing. I had never heard him talk about this. And first responders, especially first responders, don't talk about things that are painful to them. And then that just leads to the continual traumatizing, to be honest. And it's so important to talk about traumatic things. And what happens with first responders is they don't talk about it, but then they just get this really dark, hilariously inappropriate sense of humor. But they're still dealing with the trauma. And so what Keith Brower, my friend Chief Brower, said that when he finally started talking about it, some of the trauma started to abate some of his nightmares started to go away. And so this incident reminded all of us, or maybe didn't remind us, maybe taught all of us that you have to always speak about these things, that pushing them down, burying them, doesn't make them go away. Grief and anger and trauma come out in all these different ways if you don't talk about it or deal with it. And this event taught us that. So I feel it's weird to cry about people you never met. But since I've been reading about your loved ones, I have cried some. I'm going to read the resolution. Now, I'm supposed to have the resolution with me because we sent it off to get it professionally framed. It was supposed to come back on Friday. I totally forgot that it was Thanksgiving weekend. So I will send it to you, the framed resolution, but I will read the words right now of the resolution passed by the full Board of Supervisors. I'm going to ask Mr. Croney to come stand with me while I read. My colleague on the board, will you come stand with me while I read the resolution, Mr. Croney? I think you come right through here. In fact, I'm going to ask any elected official in the room at all to come stand with me while I read this resolution. Mr. Higgins, will you please come stand with me as well? Are there any other? Oh, Sheriff Chapman, thank you, Mr. Sheriff Chapman. Is Chief Johnson here? Chief Johnson, will you come stand with me as well? Thank you all, I appreciate that. When we write a resolution from the county, it is voted on by the Board of Supervisors, but it really is from county government. And although Mr. Higgins has left us and he's a state delegate now, he's still one of us. So I wanted him to be with me as well. Whereas, on December 1st, 1974, TWA Flight 514 tragically crashed into the Blue Ridge Mountains near Bluemont, Virginia. And whereas the accident resulted in the loss of all 92 souls and crew on board. And whereas the following investigation of the tragedy led to radical air safety improvements that would go on to save countless lives, including the regulation of how altitudes are related to pilots, the mandating of ground proximity, the detection, the equipment, and the development of the aviation safety reporting system, making it one of the most influential accidents in aviation history. Maybe the more appropriate word is one of the more impactful accidents in aviation history. And whereas December 1st, 2024 marks the 50th anniversary of the loss of TWA Flight 14, and whereas the lives and legacies of the souls lost on TWA Flight 14 continue to be remembered by their families, friends, and those connected to the crash. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors does hereby proclaim December 1st, 2024 as Remembrance Day for the victims of TWA Flight 514 in Loudoun County, and to recognize and remember the lives lost on this day, and also to thank the first responders and all people who joined into the effort. Given this day, December 1st, 2024, from the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors and all Loudoun County officials. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Chair Randall, and the officials for those heartwarming remarks. For the past 50 years, the story of TWA Flight 514, the 92 lives tragically lost, the brave first responders who worked through the snow and sleet, airline personnel and investigators who sifted through the debris field to recover the black boxes, and the families who suffered unimaginable loss. This story has been a quiet narrative obscured by the passage of time. The Bluemont Citizens Association and the citizens of this community chose to change that narrative. Through months of hard work, they undertook this monumental task of bringing together families, first responders, community members, and the aviation stakeholders to ensure this tragedy is never forgotten. And for that, we are grateful. And let's thank this community one more time. This moment of reflection is long overdue, and my message to the families who lost loved ones in this tragic accident: I hope that you can find solace in knowing that the changes carried out have had a lasting and profound impact, saving countless of lives, as Chair Randall said, around the globe. These improvements stand as a living legacy to those that we remember today. Sadly, the strong aviation safety record we enjoy today has been forged through the lessons learned from tragic accidents like TWA 514. Know that these lives were not lost in vain, as their legacy lies in the significant safety improvements and advancements that have prevented similar accidents. Now, the NDSB chair will speak to the critical changes that were made as a result of the investigation and subsequent recommendations. The FAA and the International Civil Aviation Organization mandated these changes ensuring a safer aviation system for everyone. Flight Safety Foundation, for its part, working in partnership, build upon these improvements with practical guidance, training material, and preventive measures with the goal of eliminating these risks altogether. These were translated into multiple languages and are in use around the globe. Today's aviation safety record is remarkable, with the industry safety transporting nearly 5 billion passengers annually, globally. In the US alone, 1 billion passengers will cross domestic and international routes this year. 6 million people will have flown by the time this Thanksgiving event and break is over. Despite handling such massive volume of passengers and flights, the safety record remains exemplary, with 0 passenger fatalities in scheduled commercial airline operations in the recent memory. This is a great testament not to chance, but to the unwavering dedication of thousands of aviation professionals who work tirelessly every day to ensure air transport remains the safest mode of travel. The job of safety is never done. The FAA, NTSB, pilots, controllers, cabin crew, maintenance technicians, and others, many of whom are represented here today, work proactively to achieve these high safety records. Today, as we gather on these hallowed grounds, let us remember the lives lost and acknowledge the pain that still lingers and draw strength from this act of remembrance. And so, as we reflect and remember, I would like to share a poem written by the poet and aviator John Gillespie McGee during World War II that I hope resonates with you. Oh, I have slipped the surely bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter silver wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long delirious blue, up-top the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. Thank you.
I wanted a second chance for this introduction. Our keynote speaker today, Chair Jennifer Hamandi, is our next speaker.
Good afternoon. Let's let me make sure I didn't mess this up. Peter, I think I would have answered to Linda. It's a beautiful name. But thank you, Peter. I'm Jennifer Hamandi. I'm head of the National Transportation Safety Board. Thank you again, Peter, and thank you to the Bluemont Citizens Association for hosting this meaningful event. The first ever ceremony honoring the 92 lives lost on board Transworld Airlines Flight 514. Hassan, thank you for your safety leadership. You and the Flight Safety Foundation have been vital safety partners for the NTSB. In fact, we're joined by a number of partners here. We have a lot of federal, state, and local officials. We have folks from the Airline Pilots Association, flight attendants, industry, I know in particular United Airlines and American Airlines. And we have our federal partners, Federal Aviation Administration, and most importantly, families in the community. So thank you all. I also want to recognize the Seeberger family for their efforts in making today possible. Together with the planning committee, Lisa and Scott were able to contact all the relatives for so many of those who perished in this tragedy. And I hear they were aided in no small part by the online research skills of their daughter, Sarah. I mentioned this to Sarah when I checked in that we're hiring. USAjobs.gov. We don't meet with Kim first. We're hiring first. I'd like to start by addressing the families that are here today. I am truly sorry for your losses, and that is on behalf of the entire National Transportation Safety Board. I imagine that it's not easy to be here, even though it's 5 decades later. Those who've lost loved ones know that time doesn't really heal all wounds. We can only learn to live with the grief and perhaps turn that grief into action to bring about meaningful safety change. I recognize that nothing, no memorial, no plaque, no remembrance ceremony can give you what you deserve to have your loved ones back. But events like this have a way of reminding us what really matters, why our work at the NTSB and collectively is so vital, why we fight so hard to improve transportation safety. Because people died, and people are still dying. Real people, not numbers, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, grandparents, colleagues, friends, neighbors, cousins. People who weren't with us for yearly Thanksgiving dinners. People who weren't here for other holidays, for our biggest achievements and celebrations in life. Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, Easter, graduations, weddings, birthdays. Today, we remember them all. We honor them all. Today, we also reaffirm our unwavering commitment to aviation safety. And today, we renew our promise to vigorously work to prevent similar suffering for other families. If you're not familiar with the National Transportation Safety Board, we're a small but mighty federal agency of about 440 dedicated safety professionals. One of them is here with me today. Tim LeBaron is our director of our Office of Aviation Safety. We investigate aviation accidents and incidents. We also investigate train derailments and collisions like the one in East Palestine, Ohio. The marine accidents like the Dolly container ship that hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Motor vehicle crashes, pipeline ruptures, commercial space mishaps. Our investigators were here 5 decades ago. Maybe you were too. Maybe you were one of the kind people who cooked for them baked for them, they, like you, remember that day. Maybe you were a responder. We can't thank you enough for all that you did and that you continue to do for safety. Our role, like you, is the same following every accident we investigate, to determine exactly what happened, why it happened, and most importantly, to prevent it from happening again. Maybe you saw the NTSB team on scene following the crash, or maybe pictures in our month-long hearing. One of their first tasks was to search for the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, the so-called black boxes. Thankfully for aviation safety, NTSB investigators were able to locate them. Back at our labs in DC, our teams got the information we needed to determine what happened. This from a recent news article talking about the recorders. The data investigators found on them resonated throughout the global airline industry and in the halls of Congress. I agree wholeheartedly, but with one change. The data itself didn't alter anything. The safety recommendations we made based on that data and all the evidence that we collected did forever change aviation. From tragedy, we draw knowledge to improve the safety of us all. That was etched in glass outside of our former training center. From tragedy, we draw knowledge to improve the safety of us all. The knowledge we drew from this tragedy has, without a doubt, made us all safer, not just here in the US, but globally. That means every person who sets foot on a commercial flight anywhere in the world. That includes all of us living, working, and playing here at ground level. Improvements like standardizing, strengthening communications between air traffic controllers and pilots. This was a major issue uncovered by our investigation. Our report stated, neither the pilot nor the controller understood what the other was thinking or planning. And it was a well-known problem. Also from our report, both military and civil aviation officials for several years had indicated concern about the possibility of misunderstandings which could result in pilots descending prematurely. Heartbreakingly, that's exactly what happened. Our investigation also revealed that a United Airlines flight flying the same approach had a near-miss event similar to TWA 514, just weeks before the tragedy. Had that information been more widely shared, the flight crew of TWA 514 might not have crashed. As a result, the Federal Aviation Administration created a voluntary confidential reporting system that is still in use today and has saved countless lives. It's a place where all aviation workers can report safety concerns without fear of retaliation, called the Aviation Safety Reporting System. The purpose is to identify safety issues early and to mitigate them before an accident occurs. And as Flight 514 taught us, to ensure vital safety information gets to everyone who needs it. One more. The aircraft flying as TWA 514, a Boeing 727, didn't have technology to alert the crew they were flying too close to terrain until it was too late. Flight 514 is the reason that large commercial airplanes today must be equipped with ground proximity warning systems, technology that warns pilots of terrain with enough time to take corrective action. I could go on. These transformational, and they were transformational safety improvements, and many others, have contributed to a remarkable achievement. One you heard from Dr. Shahidi, a record level of aviation safety. U.S. aviation is the envy of the world. Other nations look to us as the gold standard for safety. Commercial aviation is now the safest way to travel, period. And that's all because we draw knowledge, learn from tragedies like Flight 514. Now, the NTSB, we can't mandate change. Our recommendations, we issue safety recommendations after a thorough investigation, are voluntary. Fortunately, the Federal Aviation Administration made some significant changes informed by our findings in real time. They didn't wait until we issued recommendations. They took action early. But not all our recommendations were heeded. That happens more often than we'd like. Sometimes there's progress, but it takes years, other times decades, to make safety change, which is unacceptable. But I tell you, we don't give up. We fought for a safety recommendation recently for 50 years, and it was finally implemented. One that will save lives on our passenger and freight rail network. There's a question I'm often asked: what keeps you up at night? It's always the same. It's the next family that I meet who's lost a loved one. And it's the conversations that I have with our investigators, the same conversations Tim has with his, that they've seen this before, they've been here before. We've issued safety recommendations and had those recipients of those recommendations taken action, that accident could have been prevented. It's heartbreaking because those deaths are preventable. These deaths were preventable. The NTSB believes that the only acceptable number of lives lost in transportation accidents is 0. That's why we fight so hard for change, why we advocate for our recommendations, why we don't rest until they're implemented. Because NTSB recommendations are simply words on a page if no one heeds our warnings. You deserve better. You deserve action. Your family members and friends who passed away 50 years ago today certainly deserve a memorial service, yes, but they deserve more. They deserve for us to continue to learn from what happened that day so it never, ever happens again. From tragedy, we draw knowledge to improve the safety of us all. The NTSB has nearly 300 safety recommendations in aviation that have never been acted on. Nearly 300. Hundreds of safety recommendations that came at far too high a cost, lives lost. Hundreds of tangible safety improvements that could have prevented tragedies and injuries and saved lives. That could save lives today, tomorrow, the next day, but only if they're implemented. Which means we have more work to do, a lot more work to do to get to 0. 0 at sea and in our waterways, 0 on passenger rail and freight rail, 0 on our transit systems, 0 on our streets and sidewalks, 0 in our bike lanes and bus lanes, 0 along every inch of pipeline running under your feet and mine, 0 in our skies and in our airspace, 0 under the stars of outer space. Today reminds us of the progress we've made, but also how much farther we have to go. So today we renew our call for action for the 92 lives that were lost on TWA Flight 514, for those lives that we can still save. Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you and your board for all that you do. We have asked several family members to represent all of you. But first I want to read some notes. We've got so many communications from families all over the country. It was really hard to just choose two, but I just have two short ones. I think it's amazing that Bluemont citizens are recognizing this historic day in my life. Doris Allen was my aunt that was always my supporter. She was my mentor in life itself. My biggest memory of that day, I took her to the airport, I waited for her to board, and the big hug she gave me on her departure. Sincerely, Charlotte Banks. My name is Tom Pierce, and my brother, Second Lieutenant C. David Pierce, was a passenger on TWA Flight 514 on December 1st, 1974. I want your Citizens Association to know how very thankful my family is that you are honoring and memorializing the lives of those aboard this flight that fateful day. I visited the crash site many years ago while driving to Richmond for graduation. The location looked very different than the pictures I'd seen in earlier publications, but the large rock formation remained and reminded me that this is where the lives of 92 loved ones ended. Almost 50 years has passed, but I can remember that day like it was yesterday. I can only imagine the time spent planning this event and trying to locate family and friends to inform them of this special day. I know Scott Seeberger and his family had a very challenging job searching those to be invited. Thank you again for all you are doing to honor our loved ones. May God bless the community of Bluemont and its very thoughtful and gracious residents. Tom Pierce. Now we will hear directly from family members, 3 here on the stage. We'll start with Miss Bridget Jones. She'll be followed by Mr. Stephen Ani, and Stephen will be followed by Mr. Carl Swisler. Ms. Jones.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Scott, and your family for the research in finding me. Thank you to the Bluemont community for hosting the families. Thank you to the families and descendants of the first responders that supported all of the groups that came to help to locate the remains and to help to support those first responders in searching for the families. My name again is Bridget Cartwright Jones. I am the daughter of Verda Anderson Cartwright, Roscoe C. Cartwright Jr. I am the granddaughter of Brigadier General Roscoe C. Cartwright and Gloria Lacefield Cartwright. I wanted to share with you, for those of you that don't know, a little bit about my grandfather. He was Brigadier General Roscoe Cartwright, who was affectionately known as Rock. He forged an impressive record during his 33 years of Army service. He overcame seemingly insurmountable barriers during his service, provided mentoring for young officers exceeding through the military ranks, and laid a roadmap that lives today through his legacy. Serving in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War, General Cartwright was the first black field artilleryman promoted to Brigadier General and would eventually serve in the Pentagon. In 1971, shortly after his retirement for active service, General Cartwright and his wife Gloria died in a commercial airplane crash while returning to their home outside of Washington, D.C. He was born in Kansas City, and he spent his youth and high school and early years in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He has been heard to say, "I recall seeing very few blacks in uniforms in Tulsa before World War II. Therefore, becoming a soldier did not interest him until the draft initiated and started the lottery in 1940. Any plans of returning to college were put on hold as General Cartwright was drafted into the Army in 1941 and assigned to the 349th Field Artillery Regiment at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Exemplary of segregated Army at the time, all the men enlisted in the 349th were black, while all of the officers except the chaplain were white. Upon completion of officer candidate school in November 1942, General Cartwright was commissioned as Field Artillery Second Lieutenant in the 599th Field Artillery Battalion in the famed 92nd Infantry Division, where he would remain throughout the war. He proudly led his men through the rigors of combat in Italy, and after the war was promoted to First Lieutenant. General Cartwright returned with his wife to the United States. After the transfer into the regular Army, which was unprecedented for a black officer, General Cartwright was promoted to captain and served in combat tour in Korea. Next, in 1954, was promoted to major duty in Korea and Japan. He remained in Vietnam until 1971, when he became the third black promoted to Brigadier General after General Benjamin O. Davis Sr. and General Benjamin O. Davis. During this time, he had the Legion of Merit Award, Bronze Star Medal, Air Medal, National Defense Medal, Korean Service Medal, Vietnam Service Medal, and among other honors and decorations. In the meantime, the steadfast pursuit of a college degree was completed through a Bachelor's of Arts degree through San Francisco, and then further studies through his Master's of Business Administration. At West Virginia College, he taught Reserve Officer Training Corps for 3 years, where he was posthumously inducted into their ROTC Hall of Fame in 1992. In Vietnam, General Cartwright installed the Education and Information Office, created a library, and initiated college courses taught by accredited teachers servicing under his command. Even his tragic death would not interrupt the spirit, nurturing commitment embodied by General Cartwright, as it's become his legacy. The No Name Club voted itself the Rocks and established the Roscoe C. Cartwright Scholarship Fund in their namesake's honor. This influence spread far and wide in the military, as the Rocks, Inc. currently boasts over a dozen affiliations, over 1,200 worldwide members, including former chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell. One member, General Roy Bell, described General Cartwright as one who would take you under his wing and help young officers make an important connection and choose the right path, as he did, as General Bell was a very young officer. Besides 4 children, his biological legacy includes 8 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren. His gravesite is still currently in Arlington National Park. In the 92 lives that were lost, I know at one time it was said that there was nobody important on the plane, but it was important people, and some people were still kind of upset by that comment. But all I'll say is that they didn't know. They didn't realize that those words had power. But what the Bluemont, Virginia community did was recognize each and every person, no matter their military status, no matter whether they were children, fathers, aunts, cousins. They just came together as a community and helped strangers, just as my grandfather and grandmother did when they signed up for the service. I stand kind of with mixed emotions because today is the first time I've been in the place where they were, for the last time they were. But I'm also filled with honor because I stand on the wings of flight attendants and pilots, because I too am a flight attendant for American Airlines, and I know he would be proud. I stand on his shoulders and the shoulder of my grandmother, because of the things that they experienced when they were going through the military. But I also stand on the grace of the Bluemont community of strangers that I don't know, but I feel connected to, because you guys created this opportunity for me to see faces and to touch people that also have a shared experience. Thank you to the dignitaries that came to spend your time and to share your words. I am honored that in his death, in the death of our families, in the death of our loved ones, and the death of the crew members, that change was enacted. And so nothing like this has to happen again. So thank you for your research. Thank you for your time. And Scott, I'm gonna leave this for you. They have something in the military, kind of like a challenge pin. And this was the 50th anniversary of the Rocks Inc. Foundation, that they have a scholarship in my grandfather's name. And so I'll just leave this up here, and this is for you and the community of Bluemont for doing what you did today. Thank you. My apologies.
I'm Stephen Xiang Oni with my sister Fran Oni Fang, representing our parents and surviving family members. I wish to express our appreciation to Bluemont Village and its community, and especially the committee, and particularly Scott Seeberger, who managed to find us and to get us here. My essay is titled Elder Sister. I had an older sister, Susan Oni, who wed James Applewhite. We don't talk about her much anymore. She died some time ago while we were busy starting our separate lives. She and I were close in age and shared many of our years growing up, but she was the first girl, and I was the youngest boy. She had a harder time growing up being the first girl child in our family. We were the children of immigrants, bathed in the residue of culture brought from the old country, but found ourselves outside the American mainstream. My sister was 28 months older than I. My earliest memories about her have to do with being paired with her to perform at family functions. We were told to sing songs for the amusement of grown-ups who were attending somebody's birthday dinner in Chinatown, 1952. Most memorable was when I forgot the words to the song, and the performance carried on with elder sister singing. I was still 3 years old. Tragically, most memorable about elder sister was that she died with her husband and son, Benji, in an airline mass casualty in 1974. Earlier in 1974, our family had already begun to experience familial loss when our maternal grandmother died in Hangzhou, China. Our Waipo was someone we mostly thought of in the abstract because she lived so far away. This additional loss was more immediate. A daughter, a sibling, and the first grandchild had died. I hadn't ever met my nephew in person, but now I never would. His remains are kept as ashes combined with his parents' ashes because only enough parts are retrieved to positively identify the dead. Their ashes are held and enclosed in a container at a cemetery in a mausoleum niche. They will remain forever young in the photo left behind to remind us of how they looked so many years ago. At the time of death, elder sister worked as a legislative aide to Texas Representative Barbara Jordan. Elder sister's husband was a legislative aide to Georgia Representative Andrew Young. Jordan and Young were the first African Americans elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in the 20th century. Elder sister and her husband had met in New York City while she was working at and attending Columbia University. They were married at the chapel at Columbia's Earl Hall. They went on to work for Eugene McCarthy's presidential campaign in 1968. Sometime afterwards, they found work in Washington, D.C., and their son was born in 1971. They were congressional staffers who remembered my little nephew as a toddler wandering the halls of Congress, missing his diapers. The only story I know about my nephew is from earlier in 1974, when he was playing with his little friends. He came running in yelling, "Mommy, Mommy, I drive the car." My sister ran out to see what he and his friends were up to. Looking down the street, she saw their family car down the hill, several car lengths from where it was parked, crashed into the rear end of a neighbor's car. My nephew had somehow managed to pull the steering column shifter into neutral, and the car rolled away. He had driven the car and his friends down the hill. He was the same age as I when Susie performed with me as children.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Zwisler, and I'm here representing my 8 siblings as well as the rest of my family. I should warn you that when Scott Seeberger called me and asked me if I would speak, I said, "About what?" And he said, "Well, about your family." I said, "Anything more specific?" He said, "No." He said, "Well, how much time do I have?" He said, "Well, it's 5 minutes, but take as much as you want." No, I'm a lawyer. That's dangerous. But I'm not going to bill, and I'm going to try to keep my comments brief today. For those of you who are family members, I just want to, I'm sure we share some very similar experiences. I know where I was the minute I found out about the crash. And I'm sure you do too. And after that shock, the question was, well, where is everybody? Did anybody survive? We quickly learned that wasn't the case. And then the question that occurred to me, among many other things like contacting my extended family and thinking about what were we going to do, is, was I going to have to go here and identify my parents' bodies? I don't know if any of you were concerned about that. It scared the hell out of me. I asked 2 friends if they would come with me. They said, no, we don't want to do that. Fortunately, my uncle was a dentist and had the dental records for my parents and was able to send them off to, I presume, NTSB or whoever was doing that, and that identification didn't happen. So I can candidly say, for the last 50 years, I have never wanted to be here because I couldn't think of anything good about it. And I can't imagine what you first responders went through. And I'm forever indebted to you and everybody who helped us through that process that we couldn't have done. And of course, thanks to the NTSB, FAA, and everyone else who has made our lives safer as a result of what happened during that crash. When Scott asked me to come here, I was asking myself, why am I going to be here today? Why am I here? Why are you here? Well, Scott told me that he thought it was the right thing to do, and that's what the Community Association said. And I took that to heart and thought about it. So I'm here today with my wife, Peggy, my children, Rebecca, John Carl, Kevin, and Margarita, and their spouses, Yashira Zwisler, Jay Dolis Zwisler, and Ashley Creel. And I almost forgot when I wrote my notes, my almost 6-month-old grandson, Robert, is here as well. None of them ever met my parents, who are their grandparents. And of course, they were born long before that happened. But let me take you back to the time of the crash and give you my family's perspective, and I think that's what we're looking for. I was a 26-year-old lawyer, barely a year out of law school. My wife, Peggy, was a law student, preparing for final exams. My parents were coming to Washington, D.C. on a business trip, and my father was able to convince my mother to get on the plane and come to D.C. with him. As far as I know, she'd never been on an airplane before. As I said, I'm the oldest of 9 children, 5 boys and 4 girls. And my youngest sibling, Meg, was 10 years old at the time of the crash. I read press reports, as I'm sure you did, voraciously after the crash. And one of the things that really struck me was the statement that the 9 Zwissler children were orphaned. I'd never thought about being orphaned, but the language shocked and scared me. Because I remembered that my mother's mother had died when my mother was 10 during the middle of the Depression. And her 2 sisters went to live with 2 of her mother's sisters, but the younger brother, Leo, was sent to an orphanage. And he lived in an orphanage until he was 18. His daughter Jeannie is here today with us as well. But I did not want, and nor did any of my siblings want each other or any of us to end up in an orphanage. So what were we going to do? Well, within just a few days of the crash, I received a call from Peggy, my wife's mother and father, who are the parents of 10 children themselves. Peggy's the second oldest. And they asked if they could take my siblings into their house and raise them as their own. Within the next few days, I received 6 telephone calls or emails from people I had never met or heard of, making the same offer. We declined, all of them, because we wanted to be together. But it's an example of the amazing kindness that we experience as a result of this tragedy, that and what the first responders did. So how did we resolve this issue? My next oldest sister was 24 at the time and just barely 6 months married. She lived in the same town as my parents, and she agreed that she and her new husband would move into the family home and raise all of the children in the family home. We wanted to keep the family together. That lasted for a little more than a year. Then the 3 younger ones went to live in Akron, Ohio with my aunt and uncle who had no children. And after about a year, that didn't work out, and one by one they moved in with my brother or sister in Colorado. So throughout the process, although we originally stayed together, we always stayed with family. And being with family has been, I think, the most important thing to me. Our family has grown close, not because of, but in the wake of the tragic accident that we share. And I think we're unique, but I don't know, and maybe you could tell me. But throughout their lives, most of my siblings have lived very near to each other. Next door neighbors, lived across the street. Some of them still do. They're very close. My sisters call each other in 3 different states every day, and they talk with each other. In 1985, my brothers came up with the concept of a brothers weekend, where all 5 of us brothers would go to Lake Powell in Utah for a boat trip. And we've done that every year since. We wouldn't miss it. We now have siblings weekends where we meet with the whole family. The point of my telling you this is that I found, especially in thinking about this, that the impact of the crash on family has been important, but the impact of family on each of us and supporting each other is extremely significant. I can tell you how this is carried over to my wife's family. Peggy has hosted Thanksgiving dinners for her extended family. This week we had 38 people at our house for Thanksgiving dinner, all Morans, relatives. But when her father died at the age of 62, some of her siblings came to me and said, how did the Zwistlers get through without their parents? And I said, it's the family. You have to rely upon and support each other, and that's how you're going to find it. So the gift of family is important to me. I'm sure it's important to you, but this event, more than anything else, has caused me to realize that. And I hope it's created some realization or reinforcement for you. So thank you to everyone who put this program together, the first responders, the NTSB, FAA, and everyone else. That's it. Thank you.
All of you, one more time. Well, they say it takes a village. I'm very proud to be here in Bluemont. But it's a larger village that made this happen. I want to acknowledge those organizations that helped put this together. Loudoun County Parks and Rec, Brandon, Sherry, Steve Torpy is somewhere here, I think. Thank you. The Airline Pilots Association, the Allied Pilots Association, the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, Flight Safety Foundation that we heard from, the Blue Ridge Mountain Civic Association that have done so much to honor that area that runs along the road. Epling Landscaping did buy the flagpole. The tent, the rental, Grand Event Rental Center. Our caterers, which you'll all enjoy this afternoon, Graze Away, that's what they're called. And then the memorials themselves. Rinker and Fry, that company, we worked with closely. They got it done on time. Very short notice, I tell you. They got it done. The Bluemont United Methodist Church, which by the way is open today. It's directly across the street from the entrance here. We thank you. Pastor Bruce, we thank you for coming. And Percival Flores. Here. Thank you all very much. I told the following people that no matter what was going on in their organization of this event, they are supposed to be in this hall today, now. Would members of that Remembrance Committee please stand? You're probably already standing, but this is so typical. They gave up their chairs. But we thank each and every one of you. As we've heard, probably every family member had an interaction with Scott and Lisa Seeberger and their daughter. Scott and Lisa, I see you, Scott. Raise your hand. Where's Lisa? Is Lisa here? Setting up the tent outside. And I told her that she had to be here. So this is how we're going to go from here to there. This side of the hall, at least further in the back. There is an outside exit this way. If you would go that way, and the rest of you go that way, you'll both meet around the front. Yep. And that's where we'll resume with the dedication of a permanent memorial. So we'll see you out there. Thank you. Keith Brower will begin reading the names of those loved ones who perished, followed by Sarah Seeberger Behringer, followed by Brian Sayre.
Doris L. Allen. D. Benji Applewhite. James R. Applewhite. Susan Ani Applewhite. Merle M. Basil. Airman First Class James A. Bennett, United States Air Force. TWA Captain Richard I. Brock. Second Lieutenant James E. Brown III, United States Marine Corps. Mary J. Brown. John A. Buchanan III. Gloria M. Cartwright. Brigadier General Roscoe C. Cartwright Sr., United States Army. Kathleen A. Casey. Robert D. Curie. Robert J. Curie. James F. Curtis IV. John A. Depew. Janice G. Dinsmore. Scott M. Dinsmore. Wendy K. Dinsmore. Colonel William E. Dinsmore, Jr., United States Army. Private Daniel W. Dubay, United States Army. Kathleen A. Farrell. Lieutenant Robert B. Filbert, Jr., United States Navy. Gwendolyn M. Garwood. William C. Garwood III. Adele S. Goldblatt. Dr. Albert S. Goldblatt. John H. Goshorn. Mary Beth Graves. Lee C. Griffin.
John T. Harlan, Airman Second Class Charles F. Harris, United States Air Force. Lydia A. Harrison, Airman First Class Robert L. Harrison, United States Air Force. Seaman Matthew Hartley, United States Navy. Herman C. Hassenkampf III. TWA Flight Attendant Joan E. Hetty. Lance Corporal Ray E. Hefner, United States Marine Corps. Seaman David F. Holdhussen, United States Navy. Eunice J. Holman. Marlene Jackson. Barbara M. Jacoby. Miles E. Jacoby. Sergeant Donald L. Jerger, Indiana National Guard. Maddie L. Jones, Annie M. Killingsworth, Edward J. Knartzer, Ann E. Knowles, TWA First Officer Leonard W. Kreshik, James H. Larkins Sr., Robert K. Long, Frederick N. Lorenz, Ensign Charles E. Lunn, United States Navy, David S. Mahigian, TWA Flight Attendant Elizabeth S. Martin, Nanita F. Matthew, Chief Warrant Officer 2 R. Terrence Meehan, United States Army, Laura E. Meredith, Lucille D. Mosley, Motor Machinist Mate 2nd Class Petty Officer Robert L. Murday, United States Navy, Laura A. Noxon, Electronics Technicians Mate 2nd Class Petty Officer Robert L. Noxon, United States Navy.
Joyce A. Parks, Second Lieutenant C. David Pierce, United States Marine Corps. Master Sergeant Joseph B. Porter, United States Army. Sarah F. Proctor. Cadet 2nd Class Daniel T. Reed, United States Coast Guard. Sheila J. Reagan. Dr. Ephenia S.C. Raspasso, Jean K. Rowe, Captain Orville K. Rowe, United States Army. Private Jerry A. Russell, United States Army. TWA Flight Engineer Thomas C. Safarank, Private Gerald J. Seymour, United States Army. Skadwright B. Shelton. Seaman John L. Southgate Sr., United States Navy. Ruth S. Speece. TWA Flight Attendant Denise A. Stander. Dr. Richard L. Stanley. Specialist 4th Class Rodney E. Steele, United States Army. Michael M. Stokes. Irma E. Sykes. Storekeeper 1st Class Petty Officer Wendell B. Thomas, United States Navy. TWA Flight Attendant Jean A. Von Fossen. Ella R. Vaughn. Ronald R. White. Betty Jean Whitehead. Elizabeth A. Wright. Carl E. Swizzler. Mary E. Swizzler.
May the spirit of the presence of the divine be a blessing to you all. May the angels of healing, of mind, body, and soul rest gently upon your shoulders. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and to be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Thank you, Coast Guard Academy Cadet First Class, Bugler, Forrest, Slaughterbeck. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being here today. I feel very blessed to be a part of today's gathering. So now we will go into a reception tent. If any of you feel any hunger pangs, need something to drink, it's right here, right behind you. So again, thank you.